Texas is putting all its chips on old infrastructure that's basically dying. The whole state pretty much relies on dams, reservoirs, and pipes, a lot of it 100 years old. These things were made for a totally different time, a different climate, a different Texas. And now, it's all falling apart, not slowly or gracefully, but just collapsing all at once, in ways that are sometimes impossible to see, like that Tuesday morning. Quiet and clear, when a 90-year-old dam just folded. Nearly 2 billion gallons of water gone in hours. And that was just the obvious failure. Right now, there's a much bigger dam, the main water source for over 3 million people in Houston, slowly sinking into the ground. It's a geological mess no one on the ground saw coming. A threat so huge, we only spotted it from space. So, here's what I'm wondering. As Texas loses billions of gallons to collapses and leaks, are they just putting band-aids on a dying system? Or are they setting us up for a disaster nobody's ready for? May 14th, 2019, started off beautiful. The sun was shining over Lake Dunlap, a 410-acre lake near New Braunfels on the Guadalupe River. Everything was calm and clear. At 8:05 a.m., there was no flood, no storm, no earthquake. Just this sudden grinding noise of metal tearing apart. The main spill gate of the Lake Dunlap Dam, built from steel back in the 1920s, gave out. It didn't crack, it didn't leak. It just fell apart. A 90-year-old hinge, rusted through by time and neglect, finally couldn't take it anymore. What happened next was immediate and total chaos. The whole lake, a lively place for recreation and home to thousands, started to drain like someone pulled a stopper from a bathtub. 1.9 billion gallons of water churned downstream. Within hours, the lake was gone. The aftermath was completely surreal. Hundreds of expensive pontoon boats and speedboats, which had been peacefully floating, were now dangling 15 feet in the air, hanging uselessly from their lifts over a huge, empty canyon of mud. What used to be a buzzing waterfront community turned into a dry, quiet crater. Texas had a problem. The dam was owned by the Guadalupe Blanco River Authority, or GBRA, a state group in charge of the waterway. But the GBRA didn't have the cash to fix it. Estimates were in the tens of millions. The authority, dealing with similar decay across all its old dams, was pretty much broke. This wasn't a surprise, really. It was bound to happen. 3 years earlier, in March 2016, a spill gate at nearby Lakewood failed almost exactly the same way, emptying another lake. All the dams on the Guadalupe River were built around the same time with the same stuff and were meant to last 50 to 75 years. They were pushing a century now. They weren't just old. They were on borrowed time, and that time had just run out. For the people living around Lake Dunlap, the state's inability to act felt like an existential threat. Jay Harmon, who was the president of the Preserve Lake Dunlap Association, saw the destruction not just in property values, but in people's life savings. Some people have saved all their lives to have a modest home here, he said. What happens to their investment? Their community, their money, their whole way of life just vanished with the water. The solution they came up with was practically unheard of in modern America. If the state couldn't afford to rebuild its own dam, the residents decided they would make it happen. They started this incredible grassroots movement. They voted to tax themselves. They successfully pushed to create a special taxing district, a water control and improvement district, just to fund the dam's reconstruction. It was this radical act of self-reliance, born out of the government failing them. The homeowners around a now empty lake agreed to add thousands of dollars to their own property tax bills, year after year, to pay for infrastructure they didn't even own. It took years of organizing, legal battles, and negotiating politically. But they did it. They raised $40 million to rebuild the spill gates, not with 1920s steel, but with modern engineering designed to last another century. On November 1st, 2023, 1,571 days after it disappeared, Lake Dunlap started to fill up again. The boats went back in the water. The community had saved itself. It was a huge win for local people against a failing system, but it fixed a symptom, not the actual problem. The Dunlap collapse was a warning, a loud, clear, undeniable sign that the old bones of Texas's water system were breaking. And the next failure might not make a sound. The scariest threats are the ones you can't see. Lake Dunlap failed because of rust on an old piece of steel, a problem you could feel, a problem you could, with enough money and effort, replace. But 70 miles north of Houston, a much more dangerous crisis is happening in total silence. The Livingston Dam isn't some charming old spillgate. It's a giant. A 2.5-mile-long wall of earth and concrete holding back the Trinity River, creating Lake Livingston, a lake so enormous it stores over 550 billion gallons of water. This isn't a lake for recreation. It's the absolutely crucial water supply for the city of Houston. More than 3 million people rely on this one structure for every drop of water that comes out of their taps. The dam is officially called a high-hazard potential structure. That's not just a casual description. It's a formal government classification, meaning if it failed, it could kill a lot of people and cost billions in damage. For decades, Livingston Dam seemed stable. Inspections on the ground, visual checks, sensor readings. They all showed it working as it should. But those inspections missed something happening so slowly, so subtly that no human eye could see it. The dam is sinking. Nobody found this by walking the dam. Scientists thousands of miles away discovered it, looking at data sent from space. Early in 2026, a research team at Virginia Tech, led by Mohammad Khorrami, a geotechnical engineer, and Manucher Shirzai, a geophysicist, published this really important study. They used 10 years of satellite radar data, a tech called synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, to measure tiny millimeter-level changes in dam elevations across the U.S. SAR satellites shoot radar beams at the Earth and measure the signal that comes back with incredible accuracy. By comparing scans over months and years, scientists can spot tiny shifts in the ground or in big structures. It's a technology that reveals the invisible. What they found was alarming. Dozens of high-hazard dams across the country were sinking. But at Livingston Dam, things were way more complicated and dangerous. The dam wasn't just sinking. It was experiencing what engineers call differential settlement. That means it's sinking unevenly. One part goes down, while another stays put, or even rises. Mohammad Khorrami's team found that sections of the huge 2.5-mile-long embankment were deforming by about 8 millimeters, or a third of an inch, every single year. The satellite data showed two halves of the structure moving in opposite directions, creating these invisible internal stresses. Imagine trying to rip a piece of paper by pulling one end down and the other end up. That's the kind of stress inside a dam holding back 500 billion gallons of water. These findings were so significant that other groups checked them and confirmed they were right. In July 2024, a company from London called Value Space, using its own satellite analysis, found what its founder, Rejo Pold, described as significant deformation on a 350-foot section of the Livingston Dam spillway. The sinking was definitely real, and it was happening in a really important part of the structure. For the Trinity River Authority, the TRA, which oversees the dam, this news was a public relations nightmare that also carried the weight of a truly serious threat. The TRA immediately put out statements assuring everyone there was no indication the dam structure was compromised. They pointed to their extensive ground monitoring program. But at the same time, they confirmed they were actively looking for state funding to make permanent fixes to that very same spillway the satellite reports mentioned. Their public stance was calm. Their internal actions suggested urgency. Khorrami himself was careful to explain, "This technology helps us find potential issues, and then tell the people in charge," he said. "That doesn't mean that part of the dam is collapsing. Such elevation differences warrant further investigation." The investigation is happening now. But the physics of the situation remain. An earthen and concrete structure is a stiff thing. It's not supposed to bend. A few millimeters of uneven sinking every year, adding up over a decade, starts to create stresses the original engineers in the 1960s never planned for. It opens up spaces for water to seep through. It weakens its internal strength. It's the quiet, patient work of geology, slowly chipping away at human engineering. The failure of Lake Dunlap was dramatic. A failure at Livingston Dam would be a wiping out. It wouldn't just be a flood downstream. It would cut off the water supply to the fourth largest city in the United States, millions of faucets running dry. An entire city's economy brought to its knees. And all this was being uncovered by something no one on the ground had even been looking for. The state's water infrastructure wasn't just rusting away, it was being pulled apart by the earth itself. When dams fail spectacularly, they hit the news. The sudden collapse, the dramatic pictures, the immediate obvious crisis. But Texas's biggest water crisis isn't happening at its massive lakes. It's happening everywhere. All at once, a slow, silent leak that nobody sees. It's happening right now, under your feet. The state of Texas is like a sieve. Its cities are sitting on top of an old, decaying network of underground water pipes. A lot of these pipes were laid down in the 1920s and 30s, made of iron and clay, with joints sealed by stuff that's long since broken down. Every year, this underground system crumbles a bit more, and every year, it loses a huge amount of precious, treated drinking water right into the dirt. The numbers are so big, they almost stop making sense. In June 2025, when he signed a new water infrastructure bill, Texas Governor Greg Abbott laid out just how much water is wasted, along with the problem of not having enough water sources, he announced. We lose about 88 billion gallons of water a year because of broken, busted, and old pipes. 88 billion gallons is the absolute minimum official estimate. Some studies put the total annual loss as high as 186 billion gallons. Gone. Not evaporated from a lake. Not used by farmers. Just gone. Disappearing from the system between the treatment plant and your faucet soaked into the ground. Engineers call this non-revenue water. It's water that's expensively collected, treated to federal safety standards, and then pumped into the distribution system, only to leak out before anyone can even be billed for it. It's a complete, undeniable loss. It's the price of things falling apart. To give you some idea, 186 billion gallons is more water than the whole city of Austin uses in a year. It's enough water to fill up the entire 1.9 billion gallons of the Lost Lake Dunlap, almost 100 times over. Every single year. It's an invisible disaster happening daily, in slow motion, under every major Texas city. Fixing it is a challenge that's almost impossible to imagine. Main water lines run under highways, through the foundations of old buildings, and crisscross a mess of other utilities like gas and fiber optics. Replacing just 1 mile of a 100-year-old water main can cost millions of dollars and cause massive upheaval. To deal with this, Governor Abbott signed a law in 2025 creating a new fund putting up to $20 billion over the next few decades to begin the huge generational task of upgrading the state's rotting pipe network. It's one of the biggest infrastructure investments in Texas history, a necessary, urgent, and long overdue attempt to plug the holes. But that law allocates money for the future. The leaks are happening now. Every day that passes, hundreds of millions of gallons of drinking water are lost. The $20 billion is a down payment on a problem that's been building for 100 years. It's a race against rust, a battle against time fought by city crews in trenches, trying to patch a system that's failing faster than they can fix it. The slow, steady sinking of Livingston Dam is a threat measured in millimeters per year. The slow, steady leakage from the state's pipes is a crisis measured in billions of gallons per month. It's quietly eroding the state's most important resource. And just as Texas finally started facing this century-old problem, a new 21st century threat showed up. One that promises to drain the system faster than any leaky pipe ever could. Texas is trying to plug the holes in a bucket that's already half empty. The state is finally spending billions to stop the bleeding from its old pipes and rusty dams. But at the exact same time, it's basically rolled out the red carpet for a new global industry that has this massive thirst. An industry that needs billions of gallons of water not to drink, but just to think. The artificial intelligence boom has landed in Texas, and it's threatening to undo every gallon of water the state manages to save. AI data centers are the physical heart of the digital world. They're huge, windowless warehouses packed with tens of thousands of power-hungry computer servers, handling everything from your search queries to complicated AI models. And all that processing creates a ton of heat. To keep the servers from literally melting, these places need constant, intense cooling. The most common and cheapest way is evaporative cooling, which is how your body cools itself when you sweat. The data centers pull in huge amounts of water and run it through cooling towers, or it evaporates into the air, taking the heat with it. The water doesn't get reused. It's consumed. It turns into vapor and disappears into the Texas sky. The amount of water this new industry is using is just mind-blowing. The Houston Advanced Research Center, HARC, has been looking at how much water the AI boom in Texas will use. Their predictions are really serious. In 2025 alone, the state's growing data center industry is expected to use up to 49 billion gallons of water. That's more than a quarter of the highest estimated annual loss from all the state's leaky pipes put together. And that's just the beginning. By 2030, as more and more powerful AI models come online, HARC predicts that Texas data centers could use as much as 399 billion gallons of water each year. This is the huge contradiction in Texas's water crisis. The state is engaged in this desperate, multi-billion-dollar effort to save water, while at the exact same moment, it's giving the go-ahead to a new industry that measures its water use on a hydrological scale. In rural areas, local judges really wanting economic development are approving permits for hundreds of new data centers, sometimes without much understanding of the long-term stress they'll put on already fragile water supplies. The promise of jobs and tax money now is hiding the reality of the water costs down the road. One single data center campus can use as much water as a small city, 161 billion gallons. That's the extra amount of water expected to be taken from the Texas grid this year, just for new data centers. While the state government in Austin talks about saving water and fixing old infrastructure, local governments are signing deals that add astronomical new demands to the system. It's like one hand is trying to fill a bathtub with a teaspoon, while the other hand is drilling a new hole in the bottom. The issue isn't that AI is inherently bad. The issue is that it arrived right when the state's water margin for error had completely disappeared, decades of neglected maintenance, a century of overusing resources, and the now obvious impacts of a changing climate have made Texas's water systems really fragile. The sinking of the Livingston Dam, the collapse of the Dunlap Dam, the 186 billion gallons bleeding into the ground, these are all signs of a system already at its absolute breaking point. Adding the thirst of an entirely new, water-intensive industry on top of that existing crisis isn't a plan. It's a huge gamble. A gamble that a state in one of the driest parts of the country will somehow find enough water for its cities, its farms, and its crumbling pipes, while also cooling the global expansion of artificial intelligence. The story of water in Texas is now about impossible choices. Do you tax your own community to fix a state-owned dam because the government can't afford it anymore? That's what the people of Lake Dunlap did. They saved their lake. But their win just highlighted how fragile the 100 other dams just like it are, waiting for their own time to fail. Do you trust the inspections on the ground that say a crucial dam is safe? Or do you trust the satellite data from space that says it's slowly, silently sinking? That's the question for the 3 million Houston residents who drink from Lake Livingston. They're stuck between official reassurances and the unsettling measurements of real science. Does a state spend $20 billion to fix pipes that lose 186 billion gallons a year, only to watch a new industry use double that amount just for cooling? This is the problem Texas is grappling with right now. It's a race between fixing things and new demand, between saving water and using it up. The Dunlap Dam collapse wasn't the end of the story. It was the introduction, a loud, violent announcement that the easy days were over. The engineering of the past ran into the reality of today, and it failed. The invisible sinking of the Livingston Dam shows that the next crisis might not be so obvious. It could be a slow, accumulating stress that builds for years in silence until suddenly everything breaks. The people of Texas are now caught in the wake of these failures. They're paying higher water bills to fund repairs for a system they were told was reliable. They're being asked to conserve, to use less, to let their lawns go brown while watching data centers use water on an industrial scale. The community at Lake Dunlap showed what's possible with enough determination and money. They bought their survival back. But their story isn't something you can just copy everywhere. You can't have a bake sale to fix a 2.5-mile-long sinking earthen dam. You can't pass a local tax to replace every crumbling water main under the city of Dallas. The problems have just gotten too big, too widespread, too deeply embedded after a century of decisions and neglect. The alarms are definitely ringing now. From the quiet work of scientists analyzing satellite data to the governor's office admitting billions of gallons are lost. The problem isn't hidden anymore. We know the numbers, we see where it's happening, and it's getting worse fast. The question isn't whether the system is broken, it's whether it can be fixed before it completely falls apart.